In the end, everything comes back to one liberating truth. You were never the problem. The love you didn't receive wasn't a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of others' capacity. The pain you carried wasn't a sentence. It was a signal guiding you back to yourself. Healing, growth, and self-love are not destinations. They are daily choices to reclaim your voice, honor your boundaries, and stand in your fullness. You are not here to earn acceptance by shrinking, performing, or chasing. You are here to be real, whole, and wildly yourself. Let go of what made you feel small. Let go of stories that taught you love had to hurt. Begin again from within, where your truth lives, fierce, unshaken, and free. And never forget the truth this entire journey has been leading you to. You don't need to be less to be loved. There will be days when the silence is louder than the words you wish someone said. Days when you stare at the phone, at the mirror, at the ceiling, wondering what's so wrong with you that they couldn't stay, couldn't see you, couldn't love you. Let me tell you something, and I want you to hold this like a heartbeat. Your worth is not up for negotiation. The love you didn't get? The love they couldn't give? That has nothing to do with your value. You are not here to audition for affection. You are not a backup plan or a second choice or a whispered maybe. You are a force, and you don't need permission to be whole. So here's what you do when you don't feel loved. You return to yourself. You build a relationship with the person staring back at you. You stop waiting for someone else to name you lovable. And you name yourself. You become your own safe place. You say kind things to your reflection. You make peace with your silence. You dance to your own music, even if no one else hears the beat, because the real glow up. It's not in getting them back. It's in getting yourself back. And when you rise, because you will, don't just rise to prove a point. Rise because you finally see what was always there. A fire, a light, a love that begins and ends with. When someone doesn't feel loved, it's easy to fall into the trap of believing they're not worthy of love at all. The mind starts playing tricks, whispering false narratives like, I must be doing something wrong. There must be something wrong with me. Or maybe I'm just not enough. But the absence of love in a moment, or even in a season, does not equate to the absence of value. Love is not a metric for worth. It's an experience, a connection, a flow between people that can be influenced by countless factors beyond anyone's control. Self-worth, on the other hand, is intrinsic. It is something you are born with. It is your birthright, not a reward for being chosen by someone else. It's critical to understand that many people struggle to love, not because others aren't worthy, but because they themselves have not learned how to love in a healthy, consistent, or unconditional way. Some were raised in environments where love was transactional. Others carry wounds so deep that vulnerability feels like a threat. Still others are wrapped so tightly in their own pain or distractions that they don't even notice the love others are hoping to receive. So when someone doesn't show you love, that absence often speaks volumes about their own emotional limitations, not yours. There's also the question of perception. Sometimes a person may be loved more than they realize but aren't able to feel it because they've internalized beliefs of unworthiness. Maybe they were ignored as a child, dismissed in relationships, or made to feel invisible by the people they cared for most. Over time, this can distort the ability to receive or recognize love, even when it's there. So the issue is not the person's lovability, it's the emotional filters they've developed through pain. Just because you feel unloved doesn't mean you are unloved. Feelings are important, yes, but they're not always fact. They're indicators of something deeper, needs, fears, wounds, but they're not objective proof of your value. Another trap is the comparison game. It's so easy to look around and see people wrapped in romantic gestures, surrounded by friends or showered with compliments online, and assume they're more lovable than you. But social media and surface-level interactions are often masks. People post the highlights, not the lonely nights. They show the filtered version of their love stories, not the conflicts, the silences, or the work it takes to stay connected. You might be comparing your most vulnerable moments to someone else's curated narrative, and in doing so, you start chipping away at your own sense of worth based on something that isn't even real. The truth is, feeling unloved can become a powerful teacher. It can push you inward. It can invite you to rebuild from the inside out. When you stop waiting for someone else to validate you, you begin the sacred process of discovering your own value. This doesn't mean you stop needing connection. Humans are wired for it, but it means that connection no longer determines your identity. You're not desperately chasing love to feel whole. You're offering love from a place of wholeness. That shift is everything. Learning to separate love from worth is a healing journey. It involves unlearning patterns that taught you to equate being chosen with being enough. It means recognizing that being alone doesn't mean you're undesirable. It means acknowledging the times you were hurt and offering compassion to the version of yourself that internalized that pain. It's choosing to see yourself through a lens of truth, not trauma. And that truth is this: you are enough as you are, right now, with your scars, with your doubts, with the messy, beautiful reality of being human. You are not a project to be fixed, a product to be packaged more attractively, or a puzzle that someone else needs to complete. You are already whole. The love you seek from others is powerful, but the love you give yourself is foundational. Without it, no external affection can fill the void. With it, even moments of solitude become sacred. There will be days when you forget this, days when the silence feels like rejection. When someone leaves and it feels like proof that you weren't good enough. But in those moments, you have to return to your inner knowing. You have to remind yourself that some people leave because their role in your story is over, not because your story isn't worth telling. Some people can't love you the way you need to be loved, not because your needs are too much, but because they don't know how to meet them. And none of that changes your value. Not even a little. Self-worth is not a finish line to reach once someone finally chooses you. It's the soil you plant yourself in so that no matter who comes and goes, you continue to grow. And when you grow in that kind of soil, rich with self-compassion, awareness, and truth, you start to attract different kinds of love. Love that sees you. Love that respects you. Love that doesn't ask you to shrink or hide or prove. But even if that love takes time to arrive, you don't wait empty. You don't wait broken. You become your own source. You learn how to give yourself what you once begged others for. Acceptance, attention, tenderness. You learn to stay when others walk away. You learn to speak kindly to yourself in the quiet. You learn that love is not a reward, it's a reflection of how deeply you've come to know your own light. So even when the world feels cold, when the calls go unanswered and the affection runs dry, remember this: the lack of love you feel does not mean the absence of love within you. It doesn't define who you are. It doesn't limit what you deserve. It's a moment, a feeling, a chapter, not the entire story. And the story, it's still unfolding, and it's still yours. That love is often sought in the eyes of others. People look for validation, affection, and recognition from relationships, friendships, and society, hoping that external acceptance will fill internal voids. But no matter how much love pours in from the outside, if there is no foundation of self-love, the heart remains unsatisfied. The truth is that love, in its most sustaining form, begins within. It is not something you stumble upon. It is something you cultivate intentionally and patiently from the depths of your being. The concept of love starting from within is not about arrogance, self-centeredness, or building walls to avoid vulnerability. It is about the understanding that the way you treat yourself sets the tone for how others will treat you. When you nurture your inner world, you create a space where love can live comfortably, not as a fleeting visitor, but as a permanent resident. Without this internal foundation, even the deepest external love can feel distant, incomplete, or overwhelming. Many people grow up believing that love is earned by being perfect, successful, agreeable, or self-sacrificing. This conditioning leads to a lifelong chase, one where love is always just out of reach, tied to someone else's approval. But self-love breaks that cycle. It says, "I am enough as I am." It reclaims the narrative from the world's hands and places it firmly in your own. It's not built on ego, but on truth, on recognizing your humanity, your dignity, your unique spirit. Loving yourself means being honest with yourself. It means admitting when you're hurting, when you need help, when you're exhausted. It means not abandoning yourself in moments of shame, regret, or disappointment. It's easy to love yourself when everything is going well, when you're achieving, thriving, and glowing. But the real measure of self-love is how you show up for yourself when everything falls apart. Do you blame yourself Do you silence your pain, or do you hold yourself with the same compassion you offer to others? This love from within is not static. It grows, it evolves, it deepens. Sometimes it begins as a whisper, A quiet voice telling you to rest, to take up space, to speak up, to stop apologizing for your existence. Other times, it's a roar, a boundary drawn, a toxic cycle broken, a choice to leave what no longer serves you. And over time, these acts of love become habits. These habits become your baseline, and your baseline becomes your protection. When you love yourself, you stop settling. You stop overextending. You stop tolerating crumbs and calling it a feast. You stop confusing pain with passion or intensity with intimacy. You begin to see clearly what you deserve, not because someone else told you, but because you finally believe it for yourself. That belief becomes magnetic. People sense it. Healthy love gravitates toward people who are already whole, not because wholeness means perfection, but because it signals emotional safety, clarity, and strength. One of the most powerful things about love that starts from within is that it allows you to give love freely. You're no longer pouring from an empty cup or loving in order to receive something in return. You're loving because love is who you are, not a transaction or a performance. And when you operate from that place, your relationships transform. You no longer attract from neediness, but from overflow. You attract people who are also on the journey of self-awareness and healing, and together you create something honest, grounded, and real. This internal love also becomes your anchor in seasons of loss or loneliness. There will be days when relationships change, when people walk away, when support systems crumble. Without self-love, those moments can feel like the end of the world, but with it they become transitions, not definitions. You don't crumble when others leave because you are not dependent on their presence to feel whole. You grieve, you process, but you don't lose yourself. You are rooted in something stronger than circumstance. It's important to note that loving yourself doesn't mean you never feel insecurity, sadness, or self-doubt. It means you know how to hold those feelings without letting them define you. It means you don't abandon yourself when you're in pain. You offer grace. You remind yourself of who you are. You stay in a world constantly telling you to be more, do more, prove more. Loving yourself is a radical act. It is the quiet rebellion of saying, I am already enough. It's knowing that growth is a journey, not a prerequisite for worth. It's trusting your intuition, honoring your needs, and listening when your body or your heart whispers that something isn't right. It's recognizing that your inner peace matters as much as your outer success, if not more. You become your own home, your own safe place, your own sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, you can love others better, not out of emptiness or obligation, but from a genuine desire to connect, to share, to expand. This kind of love isn't needy or possessive. It doesn't cling or chase. It trusts. It allows. It respects. Because when love starts from within, you no longer fear losing it from outside sources. You've already found the source, and it lives inside you. You begin to trust your own voice more than the noise around you. You define beauty, success, and fulfillment on your own terms. You stop asking for permission to be yourself. You learn to be still in your solitude, to enjoy your own company, to rest without guilt. You learn that healing isn't a destination, but a lifelong return to yourself over and over again. And every time you return, it gets easier. It gets softer. It gets stronger. You don't rush love anymore because you're not in a rush to be completed. You are whole, you are rising, and you are worthy. Not someday, not when, not if, but right now with the love that begins and ends with you. It's a painful reality to accept, but one of the most liberating truths you will ever learn. People love based on their capacity, not your value. The love you receive from others is not a direct measurement of how worthy you are. It's a reflection of what they are capable of giving. And that capacity is shaped by their upbringing, emotional intelligence, past trauma, self-awareness, and many internal limitations you may never see. Too often, people internalize the emotional absences, the cold shoulders, the half-hearted efforts, and the disappearing acts as proof that they are unworthy. But love isn't a prize awarded for being enough. It's a mirror of someone else's emotional bandwidth. A person can look at you and genuinely admire your heart, your strength, your uniqueness, and still not love you well. Not because you're lacking, but because they are. They may not know how to love with consistency. They may not be able to communicate without projecting. They may be scared of intimacy, of being seen, of being vulnerable. Or they may be wrapped up in their own survival, too overwhelmed by life to offer anyone else a space of warmth. That doesn't make your need for love wrong. It doesn't make you too much or too complicated. It simply means you're dealing with someone whose cup is half full, if not entirely empty. Understanding this is crucial, especially in relationships that leave you confused, anxious, or constantly second-guessing yourself. When someone can't meet your emotional needs, it's tempting to start editing yourself, shrinking your desires, rationalizing their behavior, and thinking if you were somehow better, more lovable, less needy, they'd finally give you the love you crave. But what you're often chasing isn't proof of your worth. It's proof that you can unlock someone else's emotional walls. And that's not love. That's a quest rooted in scarcity and fear. People can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. If someone hasn't confronted their own pain, if they're disconnected from their own feelings, they cannot fully connect to yours. You may offer your entire heart, your truth, your loyalty, but if someone is emotionally unavailable, even the most beautiful parts of you will go unseen. And this has nothing to do with your value. It is not a deficiency in you. It is a boundary in them. This truth applies not just in romantic relationships, but in friendships and family dynamics too. Sometimes a parent who didn't know how to love you the way you needed wasn't withholding it out of cruelty, but because they were emotionally stunted by their own wounds. A friend who withdraws in your hardest moments might not be selfish, but unequipped to deal with vulnerability. That doesn't mean your needs are invalid. It means the person on the other end is loving you with the tools they have, and sometimes those tools are dull, broken, or missing entirely. That's why it's important to stop personalizing other people's lack of presence, affection, or commitment. Love is not a universal language spoken with the same fluency by all. Some people only know how to love conditionally, with walls up, with one foot out the door. Others only know how to love in crisis, mistaking chaos for passion. If someone is only showing up when you're breaking down, but not when you're shining, that's not love. That's codependency masked as loyalty. Your value isn't up for debate just because someone didn't know how to hold it. And yes, this is hard, because we all want to be seen, to be understood, to be embraced fully. But part of emotional maturity is learning to discern between someone not wanting to love you and someone not being able to. One comes from choice, the other from limitation. But in both cases, the outcome is the same. You cannot force someone to give you what they don't have. And waiting around, hoping that your patience, your kindness, or your sacrifice will somehow inspire them to change often leads to resentment and self-abandonment. This is where self-respect enters the room. When you understand that someone's inability to love you properly is about them, not you, you stop begging. You stop pleading. You stop performing. You begin to choose peace over potential. You begin to recognize that your worth is not determined by who chooses you, but by who you are when no one's looking. You stop clinging to relationships where love feels like a negotiation, where affection is inconsistent, where your emotional safety is always on the line. Flynn. You start walking away from what doesn't rise to meet you, not because you're bitter, but because you've finally realized you don't have to settle. And here's where it gets even deeper. Sometimes you are the person whose capacity is limited. Sometimes you're the one who pushes people away, who struggles to receive love, who gets overwhelmed by intimacy. And in those moments, self-awareness becomes your lifeline. Instead of judging yourself, you start doing the work, therapy, reflection, emotional education, so that you can expand your capacity to give and receive love in healthier ways. Because love is not just a feeling, it's a skill. It can be learned, unlearned, and relearned, but that process takes humility and time. And instead, you become more discerning. You learn to ask, can this person hold space for me? Do they have the emotional maturity to be consistent, honest, and kind? Are they showing up with clarity or confusion? And if the answer is no, you don't take it personally. You take it as information. And you act accordingly. Your value doesn't increase because someone finally decides to love you well. Nor does it decrease because they didn't. Your value has been constant from the beginning. It is unaffected by the external fluctuations of human behavior. It doesn't need applause, approval, or attention to be real. Your worth is inherent. You were born with it. It was never up for debate. So the next time someone can't love you in the way you deserve, remember this. Their inability is not a reflection of your life. It is a reflection of their limitation. You are not too much. You are not too difficult. You are not unlovable. You are simply in a moment where someone's emotional toolbox is too small to hold the fullness of who you are. And that's okay. Let them go. Wish them healing. And continue to love yourself so fiercely that when real love does arrive, you'll recognize it, not as a salvation, but as a reflection. A reflection of how deeply you've come to know your own light. A reflection of how fully you've come to believe in your value. You were not made to shrink. You were not crafted to dim your brilliance, mute your voice, or soften your strength just to make others comfortable. Somewhere along the way, many begin to internalize the belief that in order to be loved, accepted, or included, they must become smaller, less loud, less emotional, less ambitious, less themselves. They learn to compromise not for the sake of harmony, but for survival. To belong, they believe, they must bend, twist, and sometimes break. You were never meant to shrink to be accepted. Society, families, and even close relationships sometimes send a subtle, or not so subtle, message that certain parts of who you are too much, too sensitive. What do you mean? Too bold, too curious, too outspoken. And so you try to fit yourself into someone else's mold. You start withholding your thoughts in rooms where your perspective could change the conversation. You say it's fine me when it's not. You learn to smile when you feel like crying, agree when you want to resist, stay quiet when your soul is screaming. All because the fear of rejection has convinced you that being fully seen is too risky. But that kind of shrinking doesn't lead to real belonging. It leads to resentment. Resentment towards yourself for abandoning who you are, and resentment towards others for not noticing that you did. At some point, you have to ask yourself, who am I trying to please, and why does their comfort matter more than my authenticity? Because the truth is, the people who are meant to walk with you in life won't need you to make yourself less. They won't be threatened by your power, your growth, or your truth. They will make room for all of you, not just the convenient parts. Shrinking yourself to gain acceptance may get you into rooms, but it won't allow you to breathe once you're there. Because when you're not being yourself, every compliment feels hollow, every moment feels like performance, and every bond feels fragile. There's no peace in pretending. Authenticity is not always easy. It takes courage to stand in your truth, especially when that truth challenges the status quo or contradicts what others expect of you. You might lose people. You might disappoint those who benefited from your silence or your compliance. But you will gain something far more valuable, yourself. And that self, that full, powerful, messy, beautiful self is the foundation for every real connection you will ever have. When you stop shrinking, you invite others to rise with you. You show them that it's possible to be seen, to be bold, and to still be loved. Think of all the ways you've been told, directly or indirectly, to be less. Maybe you were the child who was too imaginative in a world that praised practicality. Maybe you were the teen who questioned too much in a system that rewarded obedience. Maybe you were the adult who pursued dreams others dismissed as unrealistic. Every time someone made you feel like your light was too bright, you were offered a choice, to dim it or to protect it. Many dimmed it, not out of weakness but out of hope, that perhaps by becoming what others wanted, they would finally be safe, loved, chosen. But safety at the cost of self is never real safety. It is a cage dressed up as comfort. And over time, that cage starts to feel tighter. The parts of you that you've silenced begin to demand air. The dreams you've tucked away begin to whisper again. The voice you once buried starts to stir. And it's then that you realize, no matter how much approval you've gathered from shrinking, it's never worth the loss of your own soul. You are not meant to fit into someone else's version of who you should be. Yeah. You are meant to become the most you version of you possible. And when you live from that place, when you stop apologizing for your existence, you find that the people who matter don't ask you to be anything but real. They don't require your silence to feel loud. They don't need you to be less so they can feel like more. They celebrate your expansion because your growth does not threaten theirs. You were born with a voice, with dreams, with presence, with energy that can shift rooms. That is not an accident. Your power is not something to be tamed or hidden. It's meant to be channeled, directed, shared. The world doesn't need more people who blend in. It needs more people who are bold enough to be seen. And that starts with you choosing to take up space. Not with arrogance, but with honesty. Not with force, but with presence. Taking up space means being rooted in who you are and trusting that that is enough. It also means being willing to let go of the spaces where shrinking is required. That might mean ending relationships where you've had to water yourself down. It might mean stepping away from environments where your growth is seen as rebellion. It might mean walking alone for a while as you relearn how to be unapologetically yourself. But the solitude of truth is always more fulfilling than the company of performance. And along this journey, there will be moments when you're tempted to revert, when silence feels safer than honesty, when old patterns call you back into the comfort of invisibility. In those moments, remind yourself, shrinking didn't protect you. It just delayed your healing. It just postponed the life you were meant to live. You are never too much. You are just in spaces too small. The people who truly see you won't need you to contort to be lovable. They will meet you where you are, not because you've made yourself palatable, but because you've made yourself real. And in your realness, they will see a reflection of what they long for too, the freedom to be fully themselves. So don't shrink. Don't twist yourself into someone else's shape. Don't minimize your needs, your voice, or your desires to be accepted by people who haven't yet learned how to accept themselves. You don't need to be less to be loved. You don't need to dim to shine. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a light to be seen. And your presence in this world, just as it is not a disruption. It's a gift. And this gift does not require explanation or permission. It simply needs expression. Not everyone will be ready for that, and that's okay. Not every space deserves your fullness, but the spaces that do, they will never ask you to shrink. And when you stop shrinking, you begin to grow into yourself. You begin to trust your path. You begin to understand that your worth was never contingent on someone else's understanding. And you finally learn to stand tall in who you are. Not because others agree, but because you finally remembered the truth buried beneath years of compromise. People love based on their capacity, not your value. Rejection, though often wrapped in the sting of disappointment and confusion, carries within it a profound opportunity, a gift disguised as loss. When someone turns you down, when a door closes, when a plan falls apart, it's easy to internalize it as failure. You begin to question your worth, your timing, your choices. But what if rejection isn't the dead end it appears to be? What if it's actually divine redirection? A nudge, a rewrote, a protective barrier steering you away from something that could never serve your highest self. We grow up thinking that rejection is personal, that it's a reflection of inadequacy. When we don't get the job, the relationship, the opportunity, our instinct is to assume something is wrong with us. We didn't say the right thing, didn't look the right way, didn't offer enough. But that mindset traps us in cycles of self-doubt. The truth is, rejection is rarely about your worth, and almost always about misalignment. What doesn't stay in your life isn't always a loss. Sometimes it's the universe removing what doesn't fit your future. Think about the relationships you begged to keep, the ones you poured yourself into, hoping they'd last, and then they ended. Back then it felt like devastation, but now with distance and clarity, you see the truth. They were never meant for you. They were lessons, not destinations. If they had stayed, they would have kept you small, distracted, or disconnected from your purpose. That rejection didn't break you. It redirected you to the version of yourself who could finally breathe, grow, and expand. Sometimes, the things we want most are rooted in familiarity, not in alignments. We chase them because they fit a story we've told ourselves, or because they validate a version of us we thought we needed to be. And when those things reject us, when the door doesn't open, we think we're being denied our dream. But what's actually happening is that we're being protected from a story that's no longer ours to live. Rejection is the redirection that leads us to deeper alignment. It pushes us toward the dream we couldn't yet see because we were too focused on the wrong path. This redirection isn't always immediate. Sometimes it brings with it a long season of waiting. You stand at the edge of what you thought would be your future, and you don't yet know what's next. That in-between can be disorienting, but it's also sacred. It's where your resilience is built, your clarity is sharpened, your intuition becomes louder. In that space between what ended and what's coming, you begin to discover yourself again, outside of what you thought you needed to be chosen. It forces us to confront the question, why was I seeking this in the first place? Was it truly for me? Or was I trying to prove something? Many of us chase acceptance not because the opportunity is right for us, but because we believe we must earn our worth. And when we're rejected, it shatters the illusion that our value is tied to someone else's approval. We learn to validate ourselves. We learn to say, even if this wasn't for me, I am still enough. That shift in mindset is powerful. It breaks cycles of desperation and leads us into spaces where we no longer beg to be chosen. We choose ourselves first. In the moments when rejection hits hardest, it's essential to pause and look beyond the emotion. The pain is real and valid. But beneath that pain is an open field, a blank canvas where something new can be born. That idea you never pursued because you were stuck trying to make something else work? Now you have the freedom to explore it. That part of yourself you ignored to fit into someone else's world? Now you can bring it back to life. Redirection opens new possibilities, often ones more aligned with who you're becoming, not who you were trying to be. Even professionally, rejection can feel like an insult to your capability. A missed promotion, a declined project, a job you didn't land. But what if that no is making room for a yes you haven't imagined yet? People often look back and realize that the moment they were told a no was the very moment their real path began. Not the comfortable path, not the predictable one, but the right one. The one that allowed them to grow into something greater, more authentic, more powerful. Redirection also builds discernment. The more you experience rejection, the more you begin to recognize what truly aligns with your values, your energy, your purpose. You no longer chase things just because they look good on paper or because everyone else wants. You start listening to your inner compass, and that compass, once guided by fear of missing out, becomes anchored in trust. You trust that what is meant for you will find you, and what leaves or what never arrives was never meant to shape your destiny. Some of the most beautiful breakthroughs are born from breakdowns that began with rejection. Think of the artist who was told they weren't talented enough, only to create their most profound work after walking away. Think of the person who was left by someone they loved, only to discover a love within themselves that no relationship could have given them. These aren't cliches. These are real stories, stories of people who turned rejection into fuel, who allowed their pain to carve new paths, instead of using it as a reason to stop. This perspective doesn't erase the difficulty of being told no. It doesn't romanticize the grief of being let go, overlooked, or left behind. But it does offer hope. It does remind you that rejection doesn't mean you aren't good enough. It means the space you were trying to enter wasn't designed to hold the full truth of who you are. And why would you want to belong somewhere that asks you to be less than whole? The more you see rejection as redirection, the less you cling, the less you fear change, the more you welcome the unexpected as part of your path. You stop trying to force outcomes and start flowing with life. You allow endings to be sacred instead of shameful. And you begin to understand that not getting what you want can be the greatest gift life gives you, because it frees you for something far better than you imagined. In time, you learn to bless the closed doors, to thank the people who walked away, to honor the moments that felt like failure. Because in their absence, you found something irreplaceable, yourself. And from that place of self-knowledge, you walk differently. You no longer chase, beg, or shrink. You know that everything that is meant for you will arrive in divine timing, and that anything that leaves was only ever meant to prepare you. So, the next time rejection comes knocking, don't panic. Don't beg for it to stay. Don't turn against yourself. Instead, take a breath and remember, this is not a breakdown. This is a redirection, and even if it doesn't make sense yet, trust that you are being led somewhere more honest, more aligned, more whole. Somewhere where the love, the opportunity, the life ahead of you will no longer ask you to prove, pretend, or perform, but simply to receive in full acceptance of the truth that you were never meant to shrink to be accepted. Attachment is often mistaken for connection because both can feel intense, consuming, and deeply emotional. But the two are not the same. Attachment is frequently born from fear of being alone, fear of abandonment, fear of being unseen. It can be possessive, clinging, and rooted in unresolved wounds. Connection, on the other hand, is grounded in presence, mutual respect, and emotional safety. Where attachment pulls from a place of scarcity, connection flows from abundance. Understanding the difference between the two is essential to developing relationships that are nourishing rather than draining. Attachment usually begins with an unmet need. It forms when someone enters your life and temporarily soothes a part of you that's been hurting for a long time. Maybe it's the way they listen to you, the comfort of their presence, or how they mirror back something you've been missing in yourself. It feels powerful at first, like a high, but very quickly, that need for closeness turns into a need for control. You start monitoring their responses, analyzing their silences, fearing the loss of something that once felt so affirming. That's the nature of attachment. It binds you to the fear of losing what you think you need in order to feel whole. In contrast, real connection doesn't trap or tangle. It creates space. It doesn't require you to perform, to earn, or to guess. You feel safe in your skin, and they feel safe in theirs. You don't fear silence because silence isn't interpreted as distance. You don't live in anxiety between texts or interactions because the bond isn't threatened by space. It's sustained by trust. Connection honors individuality while also nurturing togetherness. It grows through honesty, vulnerability, and mutual curiosity. Attachment often stems from patterns we learned early in life. If love felt conditional, based on behavior, performance, or compliance, you might seek out relationships that mirror those dynamics. You become attached to people not because they're right for you, but because they feel familiar. You mistake chaos for chemistry, inconsistency for excitement, and emotional unavailability for a challenge you must conquer. The nervous system mistakes anxiety for passion, but this isn't love. It's reenactment. It's you trying to rewrite a script that was never yours to carry in the first place. Connection doesn't make you doubt yourself. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth. In fact, the more connected you feel to someone, the more connected you become to yourself. You feel seen, not just noticed. You feel heard, not just responded to. You are allowed to be messy, in progress, and evolving, and still be embraced. There's a natural rhythm to real connection. It's not about proving your value but sharing your truth. It's not about needing someone to complete you, but choosing someone to walk beside you. Attachment says, don't leave me. I can't survive without you. Connection says, I choose you, but I can stand on my own. That's the key difference. One comes from lack, the other from wholeness. When you're attached, the fear of loss is always looming. Your mood shifts with their approval or disapproval. You might compromise your needs, boundaries, or dreams just to maintain closeness. You abandon parts of yourself to keep them close. But in the process, you lose the very person they were drawn to in the first place. You. With connection, you remain rooted in yourself. Your boundaries are respected, not tested. You can have disagreements without fearing abandonment. You can grow individually and together. You celebrate each other's wins, not compete for emotional real estate. The relationship becomes a safe container, not a battlefield for unresolved pain. It doesn't mean there's no conflict, but the conflict doesn't threaten the foundation. You feel emotionally met. The tragedy is that many people settle for attachment and call it love. They confuse possession with passion. They think loyalty means losing themselves. And society often romanticizes this, glorifying jealousy, dramatizing dysfunction, and idolizing intensity. But true connection is often quiet. It doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it feels like a calm lake instead of a raging storm. And for those used to chaos, that calm can feel boring. But that peace, that's what you've been craving all along. To move from attachment to connection, you must first connect with yourself. You must become aware of your patterns. What triggers your fears, what fuels your longing, what wounds you're trying to heal through others. Self-awareness is the first step to freedom. The more you know and honor yourself, the less likely you are to confuse emotional hunger with compatibility. You begin to choose relationships based on alignment, not desperation. You stop settling for crumbs and start seeking nourishment. Healing attachment wounds isn't about becoming detached or emotionless. It's about cultivating emotional regulation, healthy self-esteem, and a sense of identity that doesn't depend on someone else's presence. When you start living from this space, you'll notice how your energy shifts. You'll stop chasing people who don't choose you. You'll stop trying to prove your worth to those who can't see it. You'll start showing up in relationships as your full self, knowing that love built on connection doesn't require you to shrink, sacrifice, or self-abandon. And sometimes this shift means letting go of people you once believed were your everything. People who felt like home but were built on shaky ground. It's painful, yes, but it's also powerful. Because in choosing to release attachment, you create room for real connection to find you. You make space for bonds rooted in mutual growth, respect, and love that doesn't hurt. As you deepen your relationship with yourself, your standards shift. Not from arrogance, but from clarity. You stop being impressed by potential and start being drawn to emotional availability, accountability, and presence. You no longer feel the urge to fix, to rescue, or to earn love. You trust that love doesn't need to be chased. It needs to be chosen, nurtured, and honored. And in that trust, you start building relationships that last, not because they're perfect, but because they're real. So if you find yourself stuck in cycles of attachment, don't shame yourself. Those patterns were born in places where you didn't feel safe, and your nervous system did what it needed to survive. But now, you have the power to choose something different. To move toward connection, you must be willing to release the need for control, to open yourself to being seen as you are, to let go of what feels familiar but keeps you small, and to step into the unknown space of healthy love, even if it's quieter than the chaos you once mistook for care. Because in the end, real connection won't ask you to compromise your peace for proximity. It won't require you to prove or perform. It will feel like coming home, not to another person but to yourself. And from that place, you'll only welcome people who honor your truth, not just your presence. You'll know the difference between being held and being handled. And you'll finally understand that the love you were searching for outside of yourself begins the moment you stop clinging and start connecting. Not from fear, but from the freedom of knowing that you don't need to be less to be loved. Healing is often romanticized as this peaceful, effortless journey. Candles lit, journals filled, forgiveness granted. But in reality, healing is a complex and gritty process. It's not always about lightness and love. Sometimes it's about facing the darkest corners of yourself and choosing to take responsibility for what you carry, even when none of it was your fault. Healing isn't about blaming the people who hurt you, or even waiting for them to admit their wrongs. It's about acknowledging that while you may not have chosen the pain, you now have the power to choose what to do with it. When you begin to heal, you learn to shift your energy inward, not in a self-blaming way, but in an empowered way. You start asking real questions. Why do I react this way? Why do I attract the same kind of people? Or what part of me still believes I'm not enough? These questions aren't about pointing fingers at yourself. They're about reclaiming agency over your life. Healing doesn't mean pretending the pain didn't happen. It means refusing to let it define your future. It's easy to fall into the trap of blame. When you've been wronged, especially by people who should have protected or loved you, there's a natural urge to seek justice, to demand accountability. And while naming what happened is a vital part of healing, staying stuck in blame can become a prison. You can lose years of your life reliving the past, waiting for closure from people who are incapable of giving it. But healing invites a different path. It says, yes, this happened, and yes, it hurt, but I will not spend the rest of my life bound to this moment. I choose to move forward. Taking responsibility in healing means recognizing your role in your own liberation. It's about identifying the stories you've been told, and the ones you've told yourself, and deciding which ones still serve you. It means owning your patterns and behaviors, not as a way of blaming yourself for the pain, but as a way of interrupting cycles. Maybe your coping mechanisms once kept you safe. Maybe the walls you built were necessary at one time, but now if they're keeping love out or holding you back, it's your responsibility to dismantle them, gently, patiently, but deliberately. This responsibility also includes learning how to set boundaries. A huge part of healing is understanding that you teach others how to treat you, not by demanding respect with your voice, but by embodying it in your energy and choices. You learn to stop over-explaining your worth. You learn to walk away when your peace is compromised. You learn that saying no isn't selfish, it's sacred. And even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, you choose your own well-being over the comfort of old dysfunction. Healing means becoming aware of your triggers, not to shame yourself for having them, but to take ownership over how you respond to them. You stop expecting other people to tiptoe around your wounds, and you begin to tend to them with compassion. You recognize that while the world may never be perfectly safe, you can create safety within yourself. This internal safety becomes the foundation from which you build relationships, make decisions, and show up in the world, not out of fear, but out of clarity and strength. Taking responsibility also means being willing to forgive, not always for others, but for yourself. For the ways you didn't know better, for the times you stayed too long, for the moments you betrayed yourself just to be accepted. You begin to hold space for the version of you who was just trying to survive. And in doing so, you unlock the kind of self-compassion that rewires your nervous system and rewrites your story. You stop defining yourself by what happened to you, and you start defining yourself by how you rose from it. Healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel powerful and grounded. Other days you'll regress, fall into old patterns, and question your growth. But that doesn't mean you failed. Growth includes relapses. It includes discomfort. The key is in how you respond to those moments. Do you spiral into shame, or do you pause, reflect, and recommit to your healing? That pause is where your power lies. In choosing to respond rather than react, in choosing presence over punishment, there's something deeply liberating about no longer needing anyone else to validate your pain. When you fully step into healing, you stop waiting for the apology that may never come. Stop trying to convince others of your truth. You understand that your healing doesn't require their understanding. You give yourself permission to release the people, places, and stories that no longer align with who you're becoming. And you do it without bitterness, just a quiet, unwavering commitment to your own evolution. This journey also asks you to grieve, not just the people who hurt you, but the versions of you that had to die in the process of becoming whole. You mourn the innocence, the lost time, the broken dreams, and then, from the ashes you build. You start choosing peace over chaos. You start choosing love over validation. You start showing up as the person you were always meant to be, before the world tried to convince you otherwise. Healing is responsibility. It's the conscious decision to no longer live at the mercy of your past. It's understanding that while the pain may not be your fault, the healing is your duty. Not because you owe it to anyone else, but because you deserve a life that feels expansive, grounded, and true. A life where you're no longer defined by survival, but by self-trust. A life where you don't just avoid pain. You seek joy, intimacy, connection, and authenticity with your whole heart. And most importantly, healing allows you to live a life where love isn't earned through sacrifice, where your worth isn't negotiated, where your presence isn't dependent on perfection. You stop shrinking yourself for approval. You stop waiting to be rescued. You realize that you've always been the healer you were waiting for, and from that place of responsibility, not blame, you become the version of yourself that doesn't just cope, but thrives. Because healing, in its truest form, isn't about changing who you are. It's about returning to who you were before the world told you to be someone else. It's the radical act of meeting yourself fully, with all your scars, softness, and strength, and choosing to rise anyway. You understand now, as you walk this path, that no one else can do it for you. No one else can give you back your voice, your power, or your peace. That is yours to reclaim. And in reclaiming it, you finally stop chasing connection in places that can't meet you. You no longer confuse attention with intimacy or chaos with care. You honor your energy, your heart, and your healing. You move from attachment into truth, from fear into freedom, from lack into love. And in doing so, you begin to live not just from survival, but from wholeness. The kind that says, without needing permission or proof, yo,